All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. And I'd just like to kick off every meeting with just a little recap about Dalten Collective, why we're here, what it's about, and eventually I'll get to the point where I've got maybe some slides that sort of illustrate some of this stuff as well. I've been thinking about that, but today I was talking with somebody about sort of just how to make sense of the world and this emerging pattern of groups of people getting together and sort of making sense of things at the edges, which is to say that everybody has their own filter and their own means of making sense, and then they can bring the best stuff into the rest of the group and share it, and such that everybody has some better sense of what's going on than any one individual. You can share information, and this seems to be a fairly common pattern that we're starting to see emerge in the world out there. And to some degrees, it works better than others, and in some ways, I think there's still probably some things to be worked out in terms of groupthink and some other biases that networks might experience when trying to do productive things in the world. But Dalten is very much in this vein of people coming together in some size that's roughly large enough to make an impact and small enough that we still kind of know each other, that we can still watch out for each other, that we know each other's names, that where our experiences are shared. And Dalten is very much about combining the things that we need with the tools that we have, like the internet. So we've always had tribes, and we've always had groups, and like church groups and things like this in our physical space, our neighbors. We don't have something like that equivalent, or I should say the things that are like that in the internet now are few and far between. But Dalten is one of those things. It's meant to be an actual community where we can support each other, both financially, emotionally, spiritually, all of those things. We can work together to make sense of things and do productive things in the world. That's why we're here. And each time I articulate this idea and this vision, it gets a little bit clearer in my head, but it's a living thing. It's going to change over time. And I think we're still trying to learn what this is. And so first and foremost, thanks for showing up, because part of what it means to be in community is showing up. And hopefully soon that will also have some real things that we can do. And for today's meeting, I just had 3 quick things I kind of wanted to go over. And I posted that. I created a notebook in the Dalten Collective group for meetings specifically, so we can keep things a little bit more organized. And in there, I just had 3 quick topics. So going over some stuff with the multisig, a possible business idea, which is to say, I called it mining magic numbers, but it's a specific project called 21E8, where they're layering a protocol on top of Bitcoin using some proof of work such that you can get access to the data you want. And CoinFund calls this generalized mining. I think that's kind of generally what I'm going at for something we can be doing. And then the last one is I've started a podcast for the group, and I wanted to talk about that podcast, where it's going, what it might be up to, and all that kind of stuff. So the first thing, since we've got 2 folks from the multisig here, just to reiterate what the multisig is, it's 5 signatories, and the idea is to move the Dalten star, from which the name comes from, into that multisig such that it's collectively owned by all the members. And currently there are 5 members of the Dalten Collective, and those are those folks that are on the multisig. So Rapsif and myself are the 2 members on this meeting. So just quickly there. So from our last discussion, I believe in chat, that we had some issues moving around the token that we created, right?
Did you get that mined? Did it work that time, or I hadn't seen if anyone finished the signing.
I think we needed one more signer, right?
Yeah, the last time I checked, I was just hoping somebody had done it without me looking.
Okay. So looks like.
What token did you create?
Yes, we created Tenbux, and the what is it? The the ticker is DAL, DAL. So you put it all together and it's Dalten Bucks.
All right.
It does look like it's successful.
Okay. And also let me just paste it into the chat so everybody's like, I know Jack, you'll probably want to take a look at this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a Gnosis safe at that address, and the idea for spinning up this token is practice. It is a pure shitcoin. Okay, so
practice in using the multisig or practice in
yeah, practice using the multisig. So what I did is I spun up a DS token, and then I sent the authority to this address.
Right.
So the last transaction should have been to mint tokens to the multisig itself. And if I look in the assets tab, well, I have to add the, okay. Rapsif, do you have the token? Actually, it should be the to address, right, from the last transaction?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I need to add that to my assets, manage the list. And if I add that custom token and to the address, and call it $, decimals, 8 standard. Did it work? Maybe. Maybe I should go to the token balance.
How are you seeing the token balance?
Well, I'm trying to find the token balance. So what I'm doing right now in the Gnosis Safe user UI, there's an asset tab, and then you can manage a list. It's got a bunch of known ERC20 tokens. So I'm going to click add a custom one. Then when I went in there, it looks like you can't change it once you put it in. That's unfortunate. It says there's a balance, but I'm not sure how to read it. Right?
Okay. So we want to put the contract address, which is that OX4 number, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to Etherscan for that token, and I can just put this in here if people aren't following along. So this is the token address. And so from that, we should be able to get the balance from multisig. And
What's the token decimals?
That's how many decimal places, but it should be just the standard, whatever, I think it's 18, whatever the standard
18,
one is.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm getting a return from, so calling that gives I think the right amount. So let me just translate this into two-way east. No, I wanted to go from. Yes.
Are you getting that we have less than 1,000 of them as the balance?
Yeah, but that's just something screwy with notes the interface, because
that's fine. Yeah.
If you do this, right, that's the right answer. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, and that number, I got that from that's the call data coming back from get balance.
Okay.
Right. So we did it right.
Hey, I wonder what I did wrong the first time. That's frustrating.
I couldn't say.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, and then we got one more. Sarpin, nice to see you. No worries. So just to catch you up real quick, we have 5 Dalten Bucks. Ooh, huh? So we've successfully minted them. The multisig has control over the 5. And I think the last thing we wanted to do to prove competency was then to move some of these around to each one of the signers, right?
Yeah.
That was the last thing to do. I can't remember if that was going to need to be, if we could batch all those up. Probably not. I think that you can only do one call at a time. Yeah.
Well, they
So that
do
would be
ERC20, right?
Yeah, it's an ERC20.
Yeah, they're gonna have to be multiple.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
that is going to use the transfer. Sorry.
Yeah, transfer from or.
There is a way to do batch transactions with like Merkle trees. If we ever decide we need to do that, forget about that.
Or we could make a proxy. But that's sort of probably more work than it's necessary. All right. Well, this is great. So this is the last step before, I think we're ready. But okay. But I think I think we've done this to the extent now where I feel fairly comfortable that we can manage this thing on our own. Since we have a quorum here from the multisig, I'll just get everybody's opinion. So Rapsif and Sarpin, what are you thinking in terms of, are we ready to move Dalten over?
I would say maybe like the one thing that, and I mean, I apologize for this, but I haven't gotten figured. So I got Seth set up and installed. I did the transaction though through the Gnosis website. I didn't do it through the command line, and so like figuring that out, I think would probably be worthwhile. Like I don't know if you've like collated what is to be done there exactly, but yeah, I would need to know that.
I think, well, you don't have to use the command line. In fact, I used sort of both, meaning if I'm just really familiar with how Seth works and how to create call data.
I mean, yeah.
You can use whatever you want.
All right. But okay. Yeah, I guess I would probably just like invest and like double down and figuring that out because I would like to know. Like it'd be nice. And then if I don't know, we end up needing to attach some other contract, like more people have like familiarity with like the way that the multi-sig works and so whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And one nice thing about this is that if we do decide in the future that this isn't the right tool and there's something more simple that we can use, it shouldn't be that big of a pain to move it, right? It's not like it's stuck.
And one thing that we could do is like we could just like slap in like a nice sort of very simple like Web3 interface. Dap Hero has it so that like you don't even need like React or anything. You can just throw it into like static HTML.
Yeah, and I think that probably would work, though. Those is safe, from what I can tell, is fairly complicated because it adds privacy features. So it's actually submitting a transaction. You submit a hash, and then you've got to get that hash right when you post to execute it. And I haven't been able to sort of tease that apart on my own on the back because the front end does a lot of that lifting for you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look into it and see. Yeah.
Rapsif, what do you think?
So I think in order to practice the set transactions, we could all try and send ourselves one of the $10 to our own specific IDs. Mm-hmm. I still would like to get that right. Like I'd like to get a set transaction to work appropriately. I think I can do that this evening. Like I understand, I think, what I'm supposed to do there, especially with transfer from. It's pretty straightforward. Source is destination and then a unsigned integer, and
yeah,
that should be pretty easy. Especially it mirrors sort of what you've done in chat here too. So in the reverse order, at least from like it's a two-way of the amount, and that would be a good way to practice using the command line for it. I don't know how to execute from Seth. Like, I know how to generate the hash that is the transaction, but I don't know how to then send that to the chain from Seth, if that's what, Sarpin, you meant by executing it from the command line.
You can do that, but you need some helpers for that.
Okay.
So in this case, but I think Seth comes bundled with ETH sign, which is a different application, which will then, because Seth will create, bundle it up like a raw transaction. Mm-hmm. And then it will, but ETH sign needs to then find a key to use. So it has, so first it looks at your key store, and then it looks at like if you have a ledger plugged in, but that's really the only two things that it's got. It's really meant for automation.
Okay.
So like if you're running a server with automated tasks that's pushing stuff out to the Ethereum mainnet, that's what it was built for. So it's really not meant for kind of what we're using it for anyway. Especially not if you're depending on what your key, how you're managing your key, right? Because if it's in like a Trezor, maybe it's supported by Trezor, I'm not sure, but yeah, signing is the issue. But I use Seth almost exclusively for creating call data. That's what it's.
And then you just posted it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sarpin.
Oop, you went on mute.
You construct the call data and then you use like Remix or like Ethersign or something to submit it.
Yeah, I construct call data and then I'll either, so there's a custom feature just within the multisig itself. So it's like custom transaction, and it's got just the basic fields to the amount and call data, and that's it. And that's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then it figures out all of the custom other features, because I think this multisig also allows you to do having other people pay for gas costs, which is a little interesting, but also like okay. Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that. So that'll be the action item. I'll take that down as a note that we're gonna, final thing to do will be to transfer some $10 to each other, and I think we're good. And then in that sense, I'd like to propose that when we do the transfer, that we do it with all 5 of the multisig members present. It doesn't necessarily have to be public, but we should make a big deal about it. I think it's kind of an important moment in the process of this organization.
We should all sign it within the same time frame.
Well, within the same block or something. Hopefully.
Yeah.
More or less, it's an important thing, and it should be cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So moving on. The next one, mining magic numbers. So this is, and so Rapsif is familiar with this group. They really love Urbit.
It's 2E18, right?
Yeah, 21E8.
Oh yeah.
They're big
something.
fans. Mark Wilcox. It's his.
Yeah.
And it's a bit esoteric, but also I think once they've got to the point now where they can explain it in somewhat clear language. It's essentially a protocol built on top of Bitcoin SMV, where you can do, it's a meta protocol on top of the original protocol, where you can mine a number. It can be any number. It's, in this one, they just chose one because of its sort of controversialness. And then you mine some data, and you mine it until you come out with this magic number as a prefix, just like 000. And that's a flag for the rest of the folks in the network to like store that data, as far as I can roughly figure out. Does that sound right, Rapsif? Does that sound generally like what they're trying to do?
Yeah, so the mined number is reflective of the number that you're mining is the hash of some other data, right? Like,
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Then yeah.
The actual details of the protocol are less important than if we actually want to participate. And so what I mean by participate is I was thinking of doing something like I've got a server here in my house that I could use to do that, to do some of this mining or storage for that matter. I guess probably more of the storage part. And then I would donate those proceeds to the collective directly. That's what I mean by like mining magic numbers.
That'd be cool. I have a computer I could do that with too. I don't know. You said that they said that there is some specific hardware required. Is it just a high power graphics card, or what is it that?
No, I think right now, I mean, they were a little squishy on this. So the first thing anybody thinks of when they say mining is like, okay, do I need a application specific thing, an ASIC? They said, no, you're not going to need an ASIC. And then, there was a bit of hand wavy stuff that I wasn't quite sure about. Like, oh, the market will always have somebody that can use a CPU or something. That didn't really make sense to me. But my guess is right now, a normal CPU that's going to, so 21E8 is the number. So that's only 4 digits of, that's not that much work, right? Your CPU should be just fine to process that much work. But that's something we should keep. Like, in order to be profitable, that directly corresponds to, well, how much are you actually getting paid, and then what are you getting paid? So, like, if the rewards are all BSV, and that's in the liquid market, well, then that's something that needs to be considered.
BSV seems to be doing pretty well, weathering the storm as well as anything right now.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be. And maybe more generally, what I'd like to propose is something more sort of general to protocol, which is just generalized mining, like, and not just like mining using CPUs to actually like find SHA-256 hashes or whatever, but adding services to networks in general, multiple networks like Ethereum, BSV, like whoever. I'm fairly agnostic in terms of where we would choose to deploy resources, though, what resources we have should eventually have some sort of decision-making process come around that, because we only have limited resources. So in this case, I'm volunteering my CPUs and my cycles, which I think if anybody wants to volunteer to do whatever, that's fine. But if it's going to be something where there's a shared resource that we purchase together, like if we are on the hook for some server costs or something, then there'll need to be some process around that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm into giving it a go. Sorry, Zarpin.
I just said,
Okay. All right. So maybe what I was thinking with that specific project was they have a website that had some details about how to actually do this, meaning like what software to install and what should happen when you do. And I wasn't fully aware of like how to make it work, but I'm guessing I could probably invite somebody to one of these meetings to give the group a sort of like here's how our protocol works and how you might be able to earn money using it.
You invite Mark?
Yeah, or Takrit. Like,
yeah.
He seems to be, maybe more amenable to showing up. So.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Anyway, that's where I was going with that. So, I'll follow up and get a.
Interesting, yes.
21E8. Magic numbers. All right. Finally, podcast. So I love podcasts. I really do. And I've always wanted to do one. And now I feel like is the time to do one, So I went ahead and just took the initiative and got a lot of the stuff taken care of, like the back-end operational logistics stuff for hosting a podcast, or I should say publishing one, and some software that will make it a little bit easier to do. I've already got some stuff set up here, a good place to do it. And I already had a meeting on the books for somebody that I think would be really relevant to this kind of the work that we're trying to do here. So his name is Nathan Schneider, and I first met him in my previous gig with the Archain Cooperative. And at the time, through most of the Archain history, a fair number of folks were trying to make the actual co-op run efficiently in like a normal business. That in turn ended up being, for the most part, impossible. But as a side note, Nathan connected with Nathan, and in his work in media studies at the University of Colorado in Boulder, has a lot of insights on collective organization, distributed management, and people are distributed across the globe. And some of those sort of like more mundane best practices. Like, so he's really, really smart and somebody I'm really looking forward to talking with again. But I wanted to get some feedback from the group on what I should ask and what I should talk about. So with that, if anybody has some like questions they want me to ask Nathan, yeah, let me know, please. And if you don't, it doesn't have to be right now either. So if you come back to this, just post a comment. And I created a podcast ideas. And so I think Nathan, I posted one about Nathan. You can go there and put in the a question. But the interview's on this Friday, so I think that's the 3rd, April 3rd. So don't have questions now. That's cool. Post them there in the Dalten Collective, though.
Incidental note on the collective, and maybe I just need to hard refresh this page. I'm getting some weird results when trying to look at the notebooks from Dalten Collective.
Oh, yeah?
It sometimes shows them and then other times does not.
I had that same experience. I thought it was just me.
Okay.
So the way I got to the notebook that I wanted, mostly because I knew it was there because I created it, I went back to the groups tab, and I could always see it in the groups tab. And if I opened it from there, I could get back to it.
That's what's happening here too. Okay, so that's just how you're working around it for now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't know that was. It could have been like I think the publish was sort of showing up by default, and they removed that. So now it's like you have to go back and.
Got
How
it.
many books do we have?
3, so it should be.
Oh yeah, I'm only seeing 2.
Yeah, there should be.
I'm only seeing 1. I'm only seeing the business ideas. Maybe it's because there hasn't been an update in one of the other ones.
No, I mean I just posted to.
Or you just posted to the business ideas, and I'm seeing that.
I posted to that, and there's a
Oh,
meeting
you just
one.
posted to another one. Okay.
Yeah, there's meeting 1, and then there's the podcast one. So there's 4, because then I created one that was just sort of like a general place to dump my thoughts.
That's pretty cool that he's out here. I just doxed myself. I'm near the University of Colorado Boulder. So.
Did you go look him up on Twitter?
No, I'm reading your post about him right here. I mean, it's what you went through earlier, but
Yeah.
it's just neat.
You know, somebody who like might. Well, it's COVID now. Never mind.
What were you gonna say though?
There's what's his name? I forget his first name, but Mr. Owaki from Bitcoin is in Boulder. And he seems to be a pleasant guy. Yeah, I don't know. As like potential like Urbit AstroTurf substrate.
Cool. Well, just to give everybody a heads up on what else I'm thinking in terms of the podcast, I'd like to probably get my ideal goal is to try to even do like one once a week, so it's an actual like legitimate podcast. And right now I've got at least one other person sort of lined up that's willing to, and maybe 2. So actually 2. So one is, if anyone's familiar with Metacartel, which is like a decentralized autonomous organization thing in the Ethereum space. It's a guy who's very instrumental in sort of keeping those projects alive, really, I'd say. His name is Peter Pan. And Peter I met him in Berlin last year. And so he said he'd come on if if we wanted to have him on, talk about sort of what he thinks about in terms of decentralized organization and so forth. And then the other one was a guy, his name's Colin, and he does a podcast called Zion 2.0, where he's more interested in sort of like the intersection of spirituality and technology. But why I find him interesting and potentially relevant to this group is because he also does a lot of thinking about groups and more or less in the sense of finding your tribe or finding your place to belong, and how to, he calls himself a shaman, sort of, so to speak, and that's like an essential role as a part of a group. So that could be an interesting topic, especially if there's some interweaving of technology in there somewhere. From there, I think I could probably, the best way to find new people to talk to is to ask your previous guests who they talk to, and then try to network from there. And from there, it's hard to say exactly where the podcasts will go, but it should be fairly focused on the topics that are relevant to this group, which is to say an element of for-profit, likely. So what can we do to support each other financially? What can we do to support each other in other ways, like across the internet? But all in the context of being able to do this in a distributed fashion all over the place when we're not always in the same place.
What do you think about Eric and his prior interactions and his podcast on relationships? Like
which Eric are you talking about?
Eric, is it Newton? Yeah.
Well, I mean, Eric is certainly one that we could talk to as well, since he's got a podcasting background.
And he was a divorce attorney, right? Like, I wonder if we could maybe mine something out of how relationships go wrong. Like, one of the things I was talking to Scott, what the hell is it? Somless yesterday. Yeah. And he was talking about one of the podcasts that was done was like relationships where people divorced and then got back together. And I think it's kind of interesting to think about how relationships go wrong and how that can be rectified, because that's going to be part, inevitably there will be disagreement and discord, and there will need to be some remediation method.
Excellent. I'm taking that down as a note right now, because you're absolutely right. Like, there will be conflict in this group if it gets to the point where it is at all successful, meaning sticky enough that people keep showing up to these things. Eventually there's going to be something like that, and how we deal with it, we should be thinking about that now, because beginnings are important. Culture begins now.
Yes.
Yeah, so as I was watching the video from the previous meeting, like lots of the ideas that are being thrown around about what this group could be is very, very similar to what we were talking about in DAP Hub a few years ago, which more or less crashed and fell.
Give us some insight there, Jack, though. Why do you think that happened?
So I think, we haven't really done a post-mortem or anything, but my belief is that it was a bit too vague what we were actually doing. So everyone kind of had their own idea and was very individualistic about it. So already there, I think that the whole creating a ritual and tribe thing, creating a culture around it and not only having it as a loose collection of individuals is already a step in the right direction. But then also trying to already establish what we are doing, or rather how we are doing it from the start, because we kind of had a group going, and then we had all these ideas of what we want to do, like creating a freelancer cooperative, sharing legal services, just tagging people, and we were kind of switching between these ideas, and they were overlapping in time, and it was changing essentially every month. So at some point, as nice as it is, especially in the early stages, to kind of be to have it to be kind of free floating and just discover it, at some point you need to decide that this is what we're doing. Those who don't want to be part of like this particular direction, this way of doing things, sorry, this is not the place for you.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about?
The fact that MakerDAO also had its internal conflict was definitely one reason why it collapsed, but like it wasn't the only reason.
Right. Of which, yeah, I'm very familiar. So
yeah, exactly.
But what do you think about? So I've been thinking about this as well, and for me, I am more interested and committed to you, all of you, as people, than I am to what it is that you do. But I hear what you're saying. That there's truth to that. But I'm wondering if there is some sort of way in between. What do you think about that?
I think there could be, absolutely. I mean, maybe the problem is when you start involving too much money and work and livelihood dependence, and I think that makes it more difficult to not have some sort of like clear purpose.
I agree.
Unfortunately.
This is one idea that I had. I thought about how could we, like, you could say all of us are sort of free floating at the moment, which we certainly are. But if something that we're sort of comes together in this free floating space, and then if a team committed to it, such that they have resources enough to continually develop it, let's say 5 to 7 people seems about right for a small team to work on a line of business. And if that happens, then that team is committed to that particular thing and commits some portion of its resources to the rest of the collective. And how we figure that out would probably need to be spelled out, but this is just a rough sketch. So you have commitment at some level to team, some commitment to a higher level, which is like all of us. So everybody has something that they're doing, so that we could create enough flexibility in the group that we have maybe individual freelancers, we have specific teams, but it's sort of like the group is still held more by social things than it is by business things. And the business things are driven by purpose and then linked by social. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense for me. And I think it actually solves one of the other problems, which I just thought of now, which is hierarchy, which is necessary in order to manage complexity.
Agreed. And something that I think is, just to get that out in the open, I agree that hierarchy is a useful tool, should be deployed in this organization. But the idea of the way we share things is still, in some ways, I mean, it's not going to be equal, but it's going to be far more egalitarian than what you might find in a company where you're being
for sure.
Where you're being paid a wage, right? And then here in Dalten, what we're doing is we're trying to optimize 2 things when it comes to income: cash flow, which is still important, everybody needs that, and then equity in the sense of assets. So those are the 2 things that we will provide to everybody. But one is for creating long-term wealth and sustainability, and the other is for buying milk. We need to do both, and we will do both. If that makes, yeah. So cool.
Yeah, I think this is a very like fruitful direction. Like, and I think that like there's another benefit here, which is like say like maybe like dynamicity. Like, unlike a corporate structure, it's like, we can all join meetings and we can all exchange information, and there's like the capacity where anybody can sort of maybe like propose an initiative or like assemble a team or something, and potentially get consensus around that being like an initiative which is supported. But like I think like also like maybe like I think like the decision point, and this goes into the question of hierarchy, is something that needs to be sort of like firm. Like where like I guess maybe like the bottom line, like absolute decision making point, say the multi-sig or whatever, like whatever, however we have it, if like the equity gets involved somehow or whatever, just like whatever, like is that needs sort of like some consideration to ensure like sort of like stability, that it's not like getting pulled in like different directions, but it's like we have a general process, we work well together to like decide like a sort of like what sort of 3 to more things that we're like really sort of doubling down and invested in.
Yeah. And my general thought on the way that might look is an individual leader is often, in some ways beneficial. So in this case, that's right now, that's me, right? I'm the one that's driving Dalten, and I'm the one that's the most committed to its success, and then I'll continue to do that. And if we get to the point where this is, there's money on the line and real stakes, then it will be important that I have accountability, or that I'm accountable to someone or some group of something, right? Such that if I'm not doing what I say I'm doing, then somebody's going to take action around that. And that's generally, not just in a particular leader, that's the pattern that works best with everybody, is that if you commit to something, you need somebody to kind of hold you accountable to that. And if we want to, and right now, technically speaking, the multi-sig is also that kind of thing. It's a little bit different, right? Because there's no leader of a multi-sig. There's no one voice. It's not necessarily consensus either. It's just a strict vote. So whether you have the multi-sig hold the some leader accountable or not, that absolutely will need to get sort of fleshed out. And the way I want to do that is to the point right now that we're still bootstrapping and getting started. It's less important right now what those details are, but they do need to get sorted, and that will need to happen at a specific point in time. What I mean by that is almost like a Congress, a coming together to make the rules, to make what it is, how we're going to govern ourselves in detail, flush that out, and commit to it. So that's the current goal, is once that we're in this bootstrapping phase now, where we're still collecting interest, we're still getting people communicating the idea, we're still like in that phase. But when we get to a certain point, let's say 15 or 20 folks that is really committed to it, that show up on a regular basis, then we'll call a Congress or something like that and get this all written down.
2 ideas. Do you think that we should have a token mined to indicate leadership of a group? That would be, you could be deposed easily through the multisig that way by somebody transferring it to another member of the group, right? Well, I guess you can't transfer from someone's address who's a member of the multisig to someone else. That's not how that works.
No, and neither do we need to get that fancy. This is a high trust group, right? We use, at least for the most part, we use blockchain because what we need it for, which is its international properties.
Okay.
Very difficult to do any kind of shared finances across borders, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's why we do it. So we can hold it, we can audit it, we can do all that kind of stuff. I don't know that our actual governance, for the most part, needs to be there. I could be absolutely wrong, but I think, in my mind, if Dalten is successful, we only vote when there's been a failure of consensus, meaning we're not on the same page and something's not going right. Like, for the most part, I think we should be able to do this more or less socially.
Second thing is, we had talked about sponsorship as a means of entering the group previously. And I understand that in this bootstrapping, as you say, era, we're kind of trying to see interest versus necessarily doing that. But would it be a good objective for the members currently in the group to try and bring in 1 other, 2 others, something like that, to grow that number and stress the importance of showing up? Or is it really more about voluntary participation right now, and then in the future, that other thing?
Yeah, voluntary participation right now is the most important thing.
Okay.
The way I am judging how serious any one person is by how often they show up. Right?
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think it also makes sense to kind of establish what the base culture is supposed to be. I mean, that's always difficult to summarize in words, but if it's just growing organically, you will risk very quickly to have people that most existing people aren't in agreement with, which is fine. Like some level of disagreement is necessary and unavoidable, but like, what do you expect from people in terms of like the kind of base level of how you interact with each other and what you expect from the group and so on?
Yeah. So like if I could the culture being like, is this a hacker group that where we're sarcastic all the time and we're always poking fun at our leaders? Is this a more, family oriented, we're all going to show pictures of our babies, that kind of thing? Is it, number go up, coin bros? Those are all sort of cultures, and you're absolutely right, Jack. And then the culture that I see as far as Dalten is intelligent people who want to try something a little bit different in a way that's a bit more serious than the stuff they've tried before, that's respectful, that's engaging, that's interested in, very esoteric topics sometimes, somewhat diverse in its, sensibilities, but probably not entirely, because with more diversity also becomes more challenging to kind of keep cohesiveness together. But I'm really looking for coherence in the group as being its main property, and that's like, alignment around support for each other under multiple dimensions. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. And what we are going to try to build here is something like that in a particular niche, meaning, we're all probably familiar with blockchains and how they work and find them as interesting tools. We're all, interested in personal computing in the sense of owning what it is that you're doing. And that's certainly relevant. And we're sort of, internet based. We're sort of digital natives already. Which is probably, if correct me if I'm wrong, very similar to some of the cultures that we've already experienced, all of us. At least that's what I would say is my early experience with Maker and DAppUp too.
Yeah, what I wanted to say was that, for example, the description of the collective that attracted me a lot to join these calls and then participate is actually very in line with what you said, Sikdev. So I think there is a coherent message going out there, and I think it's. I mean, I'm aligned to those values. I'm aligned to this kind of culture.
Cool.
And so, yeah, just wanted to let everybody know that the message out there, at least for me, was pretty clear.
Cool. Great. And then hopefully for anybody watching too, right? Because I do think showing up is important, but I understand that everybody can't always show up. But when you can participate in chat, I take that under consideration. And I see that. Like I'm always there trying to keep things happening. Okay. Well, that's all that I had. I took some brief notes too, and I'll just publish those. But is there anything else anybody wants to talk about before we wrap up?
I wanted to comment also on what Eric was saying about perhaps involving as a requirement more people or less people. And I kind of wanted to say that I think it's might be better to keep a smaller but committed group at first. I think we might all agree with this. Because the compound effect of an initial quality group is exponential. Also in terms of diversity, there's no point. I mean, even looking at that other successful groups, not that wouldn't be of this kind, but they all kind of started very, very concentrated, because obviously, you know, the more tight people get, the more the message is of actual community. If instead there's this sense that, you know, you have to bring in other people, this might give the kind wrong message. So just wanted to share my view on that.
Cool. Thanks. All right, everybody. Call the meeting here, and thank you all for joining again. Go ahead and post this up as soon as I get a chance, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.
See ya.
Thanks, bye.
Take good care. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.